Namo Buddhaya, and the Satasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutram, the Lotus Sutra on Perfect Wisdom, the chapter 25th, the second chakra chapter. Thereupon the gods around Indra, Brahma, and Prajapati, and the hosts of men and women around the Rishis shouted forth in triumph, "Hail the Dharma, hail the Dharma, hail the Dharmahood of Dharma! Beautifully has Subhuti the Elder, through the Tathagatas' sustaining power, demonstrated, indicated, clarified, and revealed this. As potential Tathagatas, we shall henceforth bear in mind those Bodhisattvas, great beings, who shall not be lacking in this perfection of wisdom, and yet no Dharma at all can be apprehended, no form, etc., to knowledge of all modes. How much less can one conceive of a definite distinction between the three vehicles, the disciple vehicle, the Pratyekabuddha-vehicle, and the great vehicle, the Lord? So it is, O God, so it is. As you have said, no Dharma can be apprehended, and no definite distinction between the three vehicles can be conceived. As a Tathagata should the Bodhisattva, the great being, be born in mind, who will not be lacking in this perfection of wisdom and doesn't treat it as a basis. And why? Because in this perfection of wisdom, the three vehicles are explained in detail: the disciple vehicle, the Pratyekabuddha-vehicle, and the great vehicle. And yet, the Tathagata cannot be apprehended apart from the six perfections of the 20 kinds of emptiness or the knowledge of all modes. The Bodhisattvas, the great beings, train in all dharmas in the perfection of giving, etc., to the knowledge of all modes. And why? That Bodhisattva should be called just as a Tathagata if he courses as one not lacking in perfection of wisdom. When I, O gods, in the presence of Dipankara, the Tathagata, etc., in the bazaar of Dipavati, the royal city, was not lacking in the perfection of giving, etc., in the application of mindfulness, etc., to the dharmas of a Buddha, and that without treating them as a basis, then I had this prediction from the Tathagata, etc. You shall, in the future period, in just this great world system, after incalculable eons, become a Tathagata, etc. Shakyamuni by name, endowed with knowledge and virtue, well gone, a world knower and surpassed, a leader of men to be tamed, a teacher of gods and men, the Buddha, blessed Lord. Acceptance of subsequent cognition of Dharma in origination, the gods. It is wonderful, O Lord, how much this perfection of wisdom promotes the knowledge of all modes in the Bodhisattvas, the great beings, by way of non-appropriation and the not letting go of form, etc. Thereupon the Lord saw that the four assemblies, the monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, were assembled and seated, and so were the Bodhisattvas, the great beings, and the four great kings, the deities who belong to the four great kings, and all the others up to the Kanishta gods, and that they all were present as attentive eye witnesses. And he spoke thus to Chakra, chief of gods: those Bodhisattvas, great beings, and those monks, nuns, laymen, and lay women, or those sons and daughters of good family, or those male and female deities who will take up this perfection of wisdom, bear it in mind, preach, study, and develop it, explain it to others in detail, and wisely attend to it. And also those who will not be lacking in the thought of the knowledge of all modes, Mara and his host will be unable to gain entry to them so as to harm them. And why? Because these sons and daughters of good family will be well sustained by just the emptiness of form, by the emptiness of feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. And why? Because emptiness cannot gain entry into emptiness, nor the signless into the signless, nor the wishless into the wishless. In this way, to put it briefly, he is well sustained by the emptiness of the skandhas, elements, sense fields, conditioned co-production, by the emptiness of the perfections, truths, superknowledges, unlimited trances, and formless attainments, by the emptiness of all emptinesses, all samadhis, all dharani, those the pillars of mindfulness, right efforts, roads to psychic power, dominance, power, limbs of enlightenment and paths, by the emptiness of the 10 powers, the special Buddha dharmas, and finally by the emptiness of the knowledge of all modes. And why? Because emptiness cannot gain entry into emptiness, nor the signless into the signless, nor the wishless into the wishes. And why? Because there does not exist their own being by which they could gain entry, or of which they could gain entry. subsequent cognition and origination. It is therefore certain that neither man nor ghost can gain entry to those sons or daughters of good family. For these sons and daughters of good family have developed friendliness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and impartiality towards all beings, and that without taking them as a basis fact. And those sons and daughters of good family will also not die an untimely death. And why? Because those sons and daughters of good family have coursen in the perfection of giving, presented all beings with all the correct serviceable things. And those deities in this great richly cosmos, from those who belong to the four great kings up to the Kanishta gods, who have raised their thought to full enlightenment, but have not heard this perfection of reason, have not taken it up, nor not borne it in mind, not preached and studied it. Those deities should listen to this perfection of wisdom, take it up, bear it in mind, preach and study it, and wisely attend to it, undeprived of the thought of all knowledge. Acceptance of cognition of Dharma and stopping. Moreover, Kaushika, those sons and daughters of good family who will take up this perfection of wisdom, who bear it in mind, and who are deprived of the thought of the knowledge of all modes, they will certainly have no fear, and they will not be stiff with fright, whether they have gone to an empty place or an open space or on a highway. And why? Because they have well developed the emptiness of the subject without taking it as a basis, the emptiness of the non-existence of own being without taking it as a basis. Thereupon all the gods of this great earthly cosmos said to the Lord, "We shall always arrange for the shelter, defense, and protection of those sons and daughters of good family who will take up this perfection of wisdom, etc., and will not be lacking in their dwelling in all knowledge." And why? Because it is thanks to the Bodhisattva that the hells are cut off, the animals' birth, the world of Yama, the worlds of the Asuras, and among men poverty, calamities, and misfortunes are cut off. Thanks to the Bodhisattva, there is in the world a manifestation of the 10 wholesome karma paths, and so of the 4 trances, Buddha dharmas of wealthy warrior families, wealthy Brahmin families, the families of wealthy householders, of universal monarchs. In that way, thanks to the Bodhisattva, the gods are conceived, the fruit of stream winner, etc., the maturing of beings, the purification of Buddha fields, the Tathagatas are conceived in the world, those who turn the wheel of Dharma, the jewel of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It is in this way, O Lord, that I will constantly arrange for the defense of the Bodhisattva, the great being, by the world with its godsmen and asuras. The Lord. So it is, Kaushika, so it is, as you say, thanks to the Bodhisattva, the great being, are all the hells cut off, the animal birth and the world of Yama, etc. Thanks to him, there is a manifestation of the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, the Sangha jewel. Therefore, then, Kaushika, should the Bodhisattva, the great being, be constantly honored, revered, and worshipped by the world with its godsmen and asuras. And constantly should their defense and protection be arranged. He would think that I should be revered, honored, and worshipped. Who would think that the Bodhisattva, the great being, should be honored, revered, and worshipped? Therefore, then Kaushika should, by the world, with its godsmen and asuras, defense, the protection constantly be arranged for the Bodhisattva, the great being. If Kaushika, this great richly cosmos, were full of disciples and Pratyekabuddhas, like a thicket of reeds, sugarcane, rice, or sesame plants, and if some son or daughter of good family would all their lives honor, revere, and worship them with all kinds of service, and if another one would honor, revere, and worship one single bodhisattva who had produced the first thought of enlightenment and who were not lacking in the 6th perfection, then the latter would beget the great merit. And why? Because it is not thanks to the disciples and Pratyekabuddhas that bodhisattvas, great beings, and that the Tathagatas are manifested in the world, but it is thanks to the bodhisattva, the great being, that all bodhisattvas and the Pratyekabuddhas are manifested in the world, and so the Tathagatas. Therefore, then, Kaushika, the bodhisattvas, the great beings, should constantly be honored, revered, and worshipped by the world with his godsmen and asuras and defense and protection should always be arranged for them. This is the end of the chapter 25 of the Large Sutra on Perfect Wisdom, the Satasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutram.